There is a lot of stuff in DBD, perks, add-ons, lore, mechanics, and much more. As a result, not all of it ends up being entirely useful. Today we're looking over every single useless thing I could think of that's in Dead by Daylight. Hey everyone, and let's get into it. Luck is a status effect that is famously misunderstood and assumed to be much more useful than it is. In reality, it does one thing: it improves your chances as survivor of self-unhooking. That's all it does. This makes it one of the most inconsequential status effects in the game, and just really narrow ultimately in application. Luck, if anything, is more a catalyst for people taking chances on hooks, and not succeeding. It's like a positive status effect, which is really a negative one. It only really works if you work as a team to stack lots of luck, and even then, it's a dice roll. So what can be done to luck? Well, I think a good way for luck to work would be it actually performing like luck. Sort of random and coming in various ways. I always liked the way games like Fallout dealt with luck, where there's a chance you get a bonus or can pass a check of some kind due to sheer luck. Random little bonuses that make you go, ooh, that's nice. Things say like a good skill check randomly becomes a great one on a generator, opening a chest and it comes with an add-on, running past a crow and it doesn't move, healing a survivor and getting a brief boost to heal speed, getting inflicted with haste and it lasts an extra second. Things like this to me really embody luck. I get that this may be a disliked concept too. Do we really need more randomness in the game? Well, does it really hurt in such a small way like this? Games can already be decided based on which map you get or tile generation. Would small bursts of luck like this really change much? How would you change luck? Let me know in the comments. Offerings is a big category I think for useless things. I would argue a good 70% of offerings don't really do much at all. It's tough too because you ideally want that sweet spot of strong enough to feel worthwhile and impactful, but not too strong that using one becomes unfair. Looking at you, map offerings. I would make the argument that coins, reagents, salts, or luck offerings, shrouds, and Moris are all near useless offerings, all things that do near to nothing to alter how a trial plays out. On the flip side we have map offerings, which debatably do too much, but we won't discuss them for now. Genuinely impactful offerings typically alter the trial in very small ways. Things like the blueprints will dictate where the hatch or basement spawns. These aren't game-breaking events, but they do definitely influence how things can play out. It's fair though too, because both sides know it's coming. The same goes for something like branches, which can slightly alter hook distance and number, but equally will rarely affect a trial significantly. Coins are bad in my opinion because chests are already in abundance. At base you get 3 chests, which I think is more than enough for one trial. Rarely all 3 chests will even be opened. Therefore, the point of coins removing or adding chests just doesn't have much impact, I think. If survivors want a certain item, they'll typically just bring it in anyway. Possibly coins could instead influence the odds of rarity within the chest, make it so a purple coin gives much higher chances of green and purple items. Alternately, maybe chests could spawn in a certain area, or be revealed at the start of the game to the person who plays the coin. Something like that. I mean, in what world do you need 13 chests? Reagents are offerings that affect the thickness of the mist in the trial. At the moment, none of them really do much, in most circumstances. The thickest mist is still quite light and you can see through it fairly easily. There's also typically a pretty big variance from map to map, at least I find, on how the mist will affect visibility. Reducing mist also just feels sort of pointless, with the base amount not really affecting much too. I've always liked the idea personally of these offerings thickening mist in certain areas, like around shack or the main building, making it so thick neither side can see in or out. Maybe that's a bit strong though. What would you do with these? Salt offerings are offerings that alter luck within the trial. We've already sort of covered luck previously as a mechanic, and the same things basically apply to the individual offerings too. One of their main issues though is that some of them offer very low increments of luck, like 1%. Even at the highest level, you typically have to stack them together to make them even close to worth it. Shrouds are offerings that alter how and where you spawn as survivor, These offerings actually have the potential to be useful, but are useless due to how they're distributed. Killers get Shroud of Separation, a shroud that actively works against you as killer by splitting the survivors up at the beginning of a trial, and providing them more pressure. Survivors have Shroud of Union and Vigo Shroud, which are both actually fine, in fairness, but they also have Shroud of Binding, which causes all survivors to spawn together. This has the opposite effect of the Shroud of Separation, something very counterproductive for the survivors, providing the killers a greater chance of finding everyone at the start and applying pressure. My idea for this is to simply switch the offerings over to the side that benefits from them the most. Moris finally are something that currently feel pretty useless. Where there once was a time where you could use them to end games much faster, nowadays they end games at pretty much the same point you would have anyway. This is good for balance, but they also don't really serve much of a purpose. With that said, I actually think in this case that's okay. Moris I think are okay as simply a cool cosmetic thing to have, and if anything, it'd be nice if they were made a little more accessible. Maybe they could even provide a blood point reward for using them, a bit like they were meant to on that old PTB with finisher Moris. I suppose that gives them more of an effect too. Finally, regarding offerings, the effect of some being secret offerings is quite useless. Why have secret offerings when there are so few secret offerings? Secret offerings are offerings that won't flip over in the loading screen. It means when someone runs one, you know immediately what they are bringing anyway, so you may as well just show it. For survivors, they literally only have one option, so it makes no sense to make it secret. For killers, it's either a Mori or a Shroud, neither have much effect on gameplay anyway. It's a weird thing nowadays, especially with Moris lacking in power, the offering not flipping doesn't hold that same threat, especially because you know what it is. Broken Key is a key for whatever reason that does not have any effect unless you put an add-on onto it. This makes it so if you happen to uncover one in a trial chest, you are essentially left with nothing. Keys as a whole have an argument for being useless, but broken keys in particular have the greatest case. Keys can open the hatch or provide various effects with add-ons. Both of these things are rarely used, even with the higher tier keys, so the broken key is left in a very odd spot. What should be done with it? Well, to be honest, I think it should just be retired, and if not, maybe just provide keys as a whole with a blanket aura type effect, similar to maps, giving it a base use like all other items in the game have. Did you have fun is a question you've likely seen asked at the end of your games. What this does has never really been clear, and I'm not too sure even if this feedback is logged. It probably is somewhere, but does it lead to any difference? It doesn't seem so, at least not in-game. It's an odd thing, and despite my over 3,000 hours, I've maybe answered this 10 or so times, whenever I remember it exists. This further probably leads to pretty varied results where people fill it in on games they either really enjoyed or really hated. I don't have any suggestions for this feature, just more so possibly some feedback on it, some stats maybe. Otherwise it's sort of just this useless rating system. Like, what is actually the point of this? Maybe it is purely a dev side thing, which is fair. The other thing you may have seen in the endgame screen is the thumbs up. You can do this to positively rate a player you've played with. This too has no visible or direct consequence on the game it seems. It'd be nice too if it did affect something, like the game lets you know you got X many endorsements at a trial's end, or a counter of how many you'd received. It'd be a small way to make this button mean something, at all. It would probably mean quite a lot to people too, seeing people enjoyed playing with them, and it might even incentivize positive play, because people want to be commended. Devotion is a mechanic of the leveling system that has been around for a long time now, but it doesn't really do anything. Devotion is sort of a prestige mechanic that resets your level from 99 back to 1, giving you a small number beneath your level. This did nothing aside indicate you'd reset back to 1. No rewards, no change. So why not just have levels continually increment? This is even more useless than before, with it now not even displaying in the main lobby, but only when you click through to your player profile. Devotion rewards would be a really nice thing to see, and something that feels pretty plausible to implement, even if in a small way like a charm for example, for each devotion level. A number of add-ons are sort of useless. This is a category for the many varied add-ons released throughout the years that just sort of do near to nothing. They put into question why they are even providing the effect to begin with, if it can't be felt or seen. Ots actually made a video fairly recently going over all of them in detail that I'll link below. Some worth mentioning though to give some examples are Nemesis's Licker Tongue, which will increase the hindered effect applied when infecting a survivor by 0.2 seconds. This having an effect so minimal that you will never notice the difference. Others he didn't mention that are sort of laughably bad are ones such as Deathslinger's Jaw Smasher add-on, which increases your movement speed whilst aiming down sights by 1.5% as Deathslinger. Something so minimal you're never going to notice it. Oni's Polished Maydate reduces the cooldown of his power's passive recharge, but regardless it will still take over 6 minutes to charge, and can't even fully charge. For some reason it always seems to be the case that killers are released or have reworks that result in add-ons that are just useless. Why this is, I'm not too sure, but maybe due to the fear of making things too strong. Many however go too far the other way. A number of perks are also sort of useless. This one is much more debatable than the add-ons, but many definitely fit the mold. Perks such as Beast of Prey, a perk which makes you undetectable upon receiving Bloodlust, is so insanely niche in potential and activation possibility, it's confusing as to why it exists at all. We can apply this to many other perks too, like Up the Ante, a perk which relies entirely on the luck mechanic. Odd application perks like Septic Touch or Genetic Limits that, whilst having a visible effect, activate at strange and typically unhelpful times for very short periods, to the point where they are rarely used. It begs the question of why many perks are designed this way. Why bother adding new perks to the game if they aren't actually really contributing to anything, or doing anything useful or unique? To extend this, why not just alter the ones currently in the game that could use some help, instead of continually adding more? Teamwork perks are two perks I consider useless due to them being actively counterproductive to their own purpose, and are a perk type deserving of their own separate category here. Teamwork Power of 2 and Teamwork Collective Stealth were two perks added with the Lyra siblings. They're two perks that aim to get you to work together for the goal of improving your strength as Survivor. However, they do sort of the opposite. They just actively counter the team. Sticking together awkwardly within one another's radius is largely very pointless and unnecessary, especially when the effect is something as minimal as the removal of scratch marks and a 5% haste difference. These perks are awkward and detrimental for the most part, which is the reason no one uses them. Next up, the addition of this drop-down menu. Moving on, one useless feature that relates to the lore is locked lore. I see the idea behind having some of the lore locked behind challenges and stuff, but in DBD it's done to a far too great an extent, I think. It's a useless block to the lore, which is already something fairly neglected and ignored by most. Putting this extra block, spreading it around the blood web, and forcing you to complete all of these to even read a complete entry is a little silly, I think. It would work better tied to a single challenge or a larger ongoing one. I think so at least. This would make it more enjoyable to read in game and allow more to engage with it, because currently when I want to read lore I go to the wiki. I don't think I've ever looked to the game first when looking for lore. Crows are my final topic for today, and sort of a hot one that will get some disagreement. In my opinion, they are a bit of an outdated mechanic and could use some love. Currently they are pretty useless and serve little purpose, especially because many maps nowadays appear indoors, making it harder to even use crows as a killer tracking tool. Aside this, we just have two perks that even interact with the crows, something that could be altered I think to give the crows some more value. The crows I suppose equally are okay though if their role nowadays is as more of an ambient feature, but equally it feels like they were supposed to be something more, and more prominent tracking and environmental tools or obstacles. I really wish we'd get some more crow perks in some shape or form. Drop your crow perk ideas down below.